Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Call to order the October 21st meeting of the Policy Committee, Strafford Regional Planning Commission Policy meeting. And it's 9 a.m., so we're right on schedule. And to start things off, I'd like to ask for introductions. We'll start with Marilyn.
Barton, the Strafford Regional Planning Commission.
Michelle Allen, Strafford Regional Planning Commission.
Tom Clark, Dover.
Peter Levine, Federal Highway Administration.
Tom Fargo, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services.
Steve Pesci, University of New Hampshire.
Steve Brown, Wakefield.
Mark Ambrosi, Strafford Regional Planning.
Brian Tapscott, Somersworth.
Glenn Davison, New Hampshire DOT.
Bob Jaffin, Rochester.
Ken Ortman, Rochester.
Stephen Jeffrey, Barrington.
Kim Brookfield.
Brad Nichols Coast.
Cynthia Copeland, Strafford Regional.
And Lou Vita, Middleton. If you haven't heard of Middleton, then
You're
not
out.
alone.
I just want to add for that Middleton of Historic Town Hall has been added to the Seven to Save as one of the top priorities for historic preservation. So congratulations to the town.
I'll pass it on, thank you. The article, the Rochester Times had that on the front page, I believe. And it's pretty interesting. The people who worked on it was a past selectman by the name of John Mullen, and also a young lady by the name of Cheryl Kimball. And in a town where there's not very many people that get out and work, these people really stood out among the crowd. So it's really welcome. Okay, at this point we'll move on to staff communications. Cynthia.
Yes, next week I am going to Dallas, Fort Worth to attend the AMPO conference for the first time in my tenure here, which is now my 13th year. So I'm thrilled that I'm getting to go to an AMPO conference, and I'm very much looking forward to it. I've been a member of the AMPO Technical Advisory Committee for the last 4 years.
Cynthia, you may want to explain what the acronym stands for.
Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations. It's a national association for MPOs, and Steve's gone to them several times, so he understands how important and valuable it is to attend this. So I help to organize and vet the presentations for the conference, and I am also participating on the climate change webinar. That's a national project being done by Federal Highways and AMPO. So Strafford Regional Planning is going to be representing Northern New England on a series of 5 webinars on climate change adaptation and how different MPOs and regions and communities are dealing with communications planning, actual project implementation. So it's a really good deal. And for the record, I will be sending a letter of appeal to DOT, who is denying my use of UPWP funds to travel out of state.
Cynthia, did you mention that you were nominated on the AMPO Policy Committee?
Yes, I'm nominated for the National Policy Board.
All right. I had an update about last week, or this past week. On Wednesday, I participated in with Newmarket for their TE project. They had sent out an RFQ soliciting engineers for their TE project, for the transportation enhancement project for a sky bridge, which will connect their municipal lot to the mills that they're working on. So I got to go over and participate in some presentations. We watched 4 different groups come in and give presentations. For engineering consultants, 3 of them did a really great job. 1 of them did a good job, not quite at the same level as the others, and I think Newmarket has a couple of really good options for their engineering consultants. So it was a fun process, and I got to learn a little bit. And this project's really moving forward well. Newmarket is checking off the boxes and making the project move forward, which is a challenge sometimes. We put a lot of work in. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Moving on to item number 3, action items. Is a set of minutes, I believe, that you all have in front of you. The minutes of September 16, 2011. The motion would be in order to approve.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion with 2 corrections, if I could please. On last page 5 of 5, if I'm recalling what I said correctly, maybe Ed, you can check this on here anyway to make sure. I believe I said that if communication is inconsistent, then it isn't effective or is not effective. On the very last page, page 5, the very top paragraph, what I remember saying is Kay Ortman stated that if communication is inconsistent, then it is not effective, or that it isn't effective. And that the second sentence would say, Kay Ortman stated that we need to pay more attention to effectively communicate by not using short phrases and acronyms.
I will make that change for you.
So if other people, if whoever's willing to make the second remembers my saying those things, then
I second.
thank you.
Okay, motion on the amended minutes has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor of the approving the amended minutes of September 16th, 2011, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and the minutes as amended are approved. Moving right along to the letter for the from the SMPO. It's a Governor's Advisory Committee letter on intermodal transportation. We'll hold off on approval and discussion on that till after we get to section 4.1. That's okay with everybody here. Okay, moving on to 3.3. SMPO letter to the Senators and Congressmen on surface and air transportation reauthorization bill. Again, we'll put off that till after we get to section 4, which we are going to write this second. Section 4, discussion items. Draft surface and air transportation reauthorization bill under consideration. Mark, we would like to get an update on the consolidation of the programs and increased flexibility, and impact on congestion mitigation, air quality, transportation enhancement. You have 10 seconds.
I guess this has been 2 years coming, but they're still working on the surface and air reauthorization bill in Congress, trying to figure out the appropriate levels to fund Transportation Act, and hopefully for the next 6 years. There's also been one proposed for 2-year funding. One of the big changes that's in this bill is they're trying to consolidate programs down from, I think it's 90s, something like a lot of programs, down to more like 30 programs. So one of the big changes they're doing is with these special programs, which are congestion mitigation, air quality, transportation enhancement, safe routes to school, and highway safety improvement. They are trying to consolidate them into a much more flexible, I think, single program. I'm not entirely sure about that, maybe a couple of programs, and allow states to make their own decisions about how to spend that money. One of the issues with that in New Hampshire, in my view, I guess, is we don't have a state mechanism for funding bicycle, pedestrian activities, transit activities, which would be CMAC, park and rides, which was also the congestion mitigation. And we don't have any mechanisms that I know of currently to be responsive to the most dangerous areas on our highway, which is what the Highway Safety Improvement Program does. It allows us to go in without having to go through the entire 10-year plan process, which I think we all know it takes a little while, and we're trying to reform it at this point. So there's some issues with those programs right now, and I guess kind of tying back into the letter that we're writing to the Governor's Advisory Committee on Intermodal Transportation. New Hampshire is planning on reducing the funding for those special programs that I just talked about, in order to use that money to repair bridges and a number of other very important causes. But I think through our letter, what we're trying to say is that we need to continue funding the CMAQ transportation enhancement and these other programs, because they add a lot of value for not a lot of money in our state. And we have the letter that we have written here with comments, and I'm not sure if people would like me to go through the letter about those, just the general comments about those funding categories, or if people have had a chance to read those.
I think, Mark, if you could just point out kind of the difference between how the overall funding cuts were applied versus in some of these programs specifically.
Okay, so just off the bat, our current trust fund for transportation only has enough money to fund us at, I believe it's 30% or 35% less than what we're getting currently. So across the board, we have a 30 to 35% cut for our transportation programs in general. Beyond that, with these programs, New Hampshire has been funding them at a higher level than they're required to, which has been great. It's been very helpful. It's one of the few ways that our communities in our region get projects into the 10-year plan and get important projects to happen, and it's one of the few ways we fund transit in our state. But because we're funding them above the minimum level, we have the ability they're already receiving that 30% cut. We also have the ability to shift about 50% of those funds that they currently have away from those programs and into other transportation programs for funding bridges and other maintaining highways. So not only are these programs experiencing a 30% cut, there's another 50% cut on top. So it comes out to being basically a 66% reduction across the board for these special funding programs, which really takes a lot of the bite out of these programs. It's much harder to get as many projects through. It's harder to fund transit. It's harder to get the most important projects for our communities done, and projects onto the 10-year plan, because this was one of the only mechanisms that was effective for getting projects onto the 10-year plan for communities.
I think so that was the state, but at the federal level, I think that's what your question was about, or add information about at the federal level. So at the federal level, the reauthorization bill is looking at combining programs, eliminating programs to give additional flexibility to the DOTs in the states to do their functions and live within a decreased budget, which all of us who have budgets in their private life understand that it's easier to manage your dollars when there's less mandates on how you do it. It's more flexible and you can do it. There's common sense pragmatism in that. But the concern is that these programs, which are so important to the communities and to the transit agents,